In today's video, I'm going to be building this fully customized mobile enclosure for my laser machine. This build features a fold-out shelf, drawers and shelving for storage, as well as a fully customized and ducted enclosure for the laser. So stick around and find out how I built it. The main frame of this build is once again going to be made up of some pine 2x4 shorts that I'm laminating together to make up thicker stock. Pine is often an underrated material, but I think it makes for a nice contrast against the black form ply in workshop builds. It really wasn't that long ago that I was doing this type of glue up one leg at a time because that's as many clamps as I had. Parallel clamps certainly make this task a lot easier, and we've certainly come a long way from those early days of only doing one at a time. For these legs, we're aiming for the stock to come out as 60mm by 60mm, which is just under 2.5 inches, give or take. So the next step is to send each of these through the jointer just to clean up one of the edges and get a nice square reference before we send this through the thicknesser. And our final step will be to cut one end square and true on the table saw. I'll also take the opportunity to remove any snipe from the ends that I might have introduced into these legs when I sent them through the planer. We now have the stock for our legs, and off camera I also processed the rest of the pine shorts that will make up the rest of the frame. Last step here is to square off some of the edges on the longer rails and then cut everything to their final length. The miter saw doesn't quite have enough capacity to cut these legs in one pass, so I just need to rotate them to finish the cut. And in a relatively short amount of time, we now have all of our timber for our frame ready, and we can start thinking about our joinery method. Now for the joinery, I'm going to be using floating tenons, and yes, that does mean the domino joiner. Now I do appreciate, and well, I understand that a few of you will be disappointed to see this tool in yet another YouTube maker's video. And it is, after all, a very expensive and very specific tool. Woodworking is all about problem solving, and if you see a project that you like that uses a joinery technique or tool that you don't have access to, then substitute it with one that works for you. Don't want to use dominoes? Well, consider maybe dowels. If you don't have a doweling jig, then what about pocket holes or just even screws in general? In fact, my entire first bench was made with just screws and pocket screws, and that came out perfectly fine. All it takes is a little bit of imagination to switch out one joinery technique or tool with one that works for you. Right, so let's move on now, and I've gone ahead and cut all the tenons into all the leg and rail pieces, and I'll do a quick dry fit to ensure that it's all correct and fitting nicely. A handy tip is to mark each join with a letter or number so that when you're assembling you will be able to correctly align and place each piece in their corresponding position. The speed and accuracy of the domino is really hard to beat. To cut all the floating tenons really only took about 30 minutes total. That's all come together really well, so now it's time to make it a little bit more permanent and add glue. To make this process a little less stressful, I'm going to glue two sides separately, and then once those are dry, I'll glue the entire frame together. And of course, Mr. Long Splinter, I did check for square. So while I've got it in this orientation, I'm going to work on the feet a little bit. I'm going to add some blocking to each side here because the casters that I'm using are a little bit wider. They don't fit exactly on. So we'd only get one particular screw hole on there, which is obviously no good. So what I'm going to do is add some blocking around here just to beef up the legs, and that'll allow for these casters to sit on there. So these casters are the same ones that I've used on the workbench build here. So they're a very heavy duty caster, I think 1.4 tons or 1400 kilos, give or take. They are fully height adjustable, so you can actually lock them in, so they can adjust this pivot here and it will raise this, and you can actually sit on the floor. I just leave them on the wheels, generally speaking. I've left this one on the wheels, highly mobile, and makes it easier. So let's go ahead and add those blocks. Putting your tools, workbenches or other containers on wheels is a great way to make your workshop a bit more flexible, especially if you happen to have a small shop. Being able to move things like my benches, my tools, and especially my wood storage has been super handy in being able to maximize this space. I get asked about these casters all the time, so I'll leave a link to where I get mine from. With the frame basically done now, I'm going to turn my attention to the sides. I only have this single form ply panel in stock at the moment, but I did want to get a leg up on making at least one of the sides because there is a cool feature that I want to implement before the rest of the form ply arrives. Like any panel or plywood sheet good, it's often a good idea to run one edge through the table saw just to get yourself one clean straight edge. I've demonstrated this in the past that not all form ply is going to come out from the manufacturer at a perfect 90 degree, and it's a good habit to get into as it will save you a lot of headache and hassle later on in your projects. The side panels will attach to the top rail and the bottom rail, and the fit is good enough here that you can't see any gaps from the other side. To attach the panel to the frame, I'm just going to use some simple wood screws. It's always a good idea to pre-drill and countersink when using form ply. The film face or resin is more brittle once the surface is cracked, and countersinking will stop any possibility of that happening when you go to insert your screws. While I wait for more form ply to arrive, I'm going to switch my focus to a flip up ledge that I want to build into the side of the workbench. It'll create a temporary workplace for me to put my notebook and other things that I'm using while I'm using the laser. I'm going to make this out of some of my last form ply scraps, as well as some dowels that I have on hand. It was at this point I started doing what I normally do, which is to create a template model out of wood first, and then model the rest of the items on that template. It quickly occurred to me that I have a laser, why not create the template on that instead? So jumping into Lightburn, I whipped up the template and cut it out on the laser. Using Lightburn for this type of template is really easy, and if you're familiar with programs like Google SketchUp or even Easel, then I don't think you'll have any problems with using Lightburn. I can definitely see the laser being a really useful tool for making these type of templates and patterns in the future. A bit of double-sided tape is all it takes to attach our blanks to the template, and we can then cut the holes out on the drill press. And then to finish off the profile, we'll use a trim router bit on the router table. And then a quick pass over with a roundover bit to smooth all the edges out. First thing is to attach the brackets that hold the pivot for the ledge. This will screw into a leg on each side. If you don't have one of these right angled drill adapters, I strongly recommend getting one. Super useful and will come in handy when you just can't get a drill into awkward spaces like this one. It's important that at this point I insert all of the supports and the dowel first before attaching the final bracket. This is because once I add the bracket, I will not be able to insert the dowel again because it will be locked in because of the edges of the legs. Next are the supporting dowel pegs that hold the bracket arms. I'm going to glue and put a locking screw into each one to ensure that it doesn't fall out or move. Off camera I made this simple bracket. It's nothing complicated, just somewhere for the crossbar to rest on when it's in the upright position. This is fixed to the side with wood screws once again. You can see how this is going to work and allow for the tray to be put back down when not in use. For the top of the tray, I'm going to repurpose a piece of laminated MDF that came from my daughter's old desk. The tray was attached again with screws, but in my impatience to see how this was going to turn out, I made a silly mistake. See if you can work out what I did. Right, so mistake. In my enthusiasm to get the top on, I've butted it up right against here, and I thought I had enough wiggle room to raise this, but I do not. So what I'm going to need to do is bring this back 5 mil or so to give it a little bit of room so it can go back up again to allow the bar to come off the cleat, and that should solve that problem. But Yeah, it's a bit annoying, just have to shift back a little tiny bit. So after solving that small error and reattaching the top, it was time to test it all out. It's a perfect comfortable height to work at, and there is plenty of strength. And it was just at this time that my form ply arrived, and that meant that I could crack on with finalising the other side of the cart. It was at this point I contemplated bringing the panel into the shop to cut it, but I remembered from previous experience just how messy it was to cut this using my particular circular saw. I decided instead it would be easier just to cut it here outside on the grass instead. And a friendly reminder to put your camera on a flat level surface and not on the grass. With both sides now in, it was at this point where I didn't really have a plan for what I wanted to put inside the frame. Eventually I decided not to overcommit to anything too permanent and just start with a simple shelf in the base to at least cover up the base. I cut some long form ply strips to serve as cleats for the bottom shelf to fit onto and fixed them into the base using screws. Other than the frame itself, I'm avoiding using glue so that should I need to or want to modify this, I can do so without too much hassle. I cut the base panel off camera and dropped it into place. You've really got to love those friction fits. Okay, so we've got the base in now. It's not screwed in, just in case I want to take this out later on for modifications or any other specific reasons. It's just going to sit on there, and there's no real reason to screw it in. It doesn't really need to be. But I need to turn my attention to what next, what to put in here, because I don't want to put drawers or cupboards or whatever it is in here, because I think what I want to do is leave this hollow through here so that I can dump scraps of whatever I'm cutting out, spares, etc., and just have that as a bit of a dumping storage type thing, and that I can sift through when I want to cut something out. So I think I want to do that, but I think I definitely need at least a drawer up here, maybe two drawers, I'm not sure, to be able to store some laser stuff, because there's a whole bunch of accessories and things that go along with this, isn't there? So rather than have one that's, well, all the way through, I should say, one drawer slide, which I don't think is really feasible with it, because it is quite deep, quite wide. I do have a bunch of these. I think they're 30mm, yeah, 300mm drawer slides, and if I put them back to back, front to back, sorry, they fit pretty good. So I'm thinking of maybe a sliding drawer on this side and then a sliding drawer here, just to store a few things. I am cautious though, in case I needed to go down from the top for the laser, but I don't think I need to. I think most of the cables and whatnot are going to go out the side, and anything in terms of venting are going to come out the back here. So I think it's going to be okay. Or actually, if it comes out the back, I might not be able to put it over this, have it drop down in front of the drawer. I might have to make sure it vents that way, because there's nothing on that side. Yeah, okay, so that should be fine. So I guess that's the plan at this stage. I'm going to make some drawers to go in there, and I guess we'll see how we go. The drawers are just made out of strips of form ply with an MDF bottom and assembled with pocket screws. Making and installing drawers is something I've covered many times in previous videos, and I've shown a few different ways that you can go about doing it. Check out some of those videos if you're interested in learning more about drawer construction. At this stage it was getting late in the day, so I decided to finish it off with putting the top on. Nothing complex or complicated here, just a piece of form ply cut to size and screwed in at the top. Well, good morning everyone. It's a nice, rainy and rumbly day here in Barber's Paddock, so good day to be in the shop. I will be focusing on the enclosure, of course, today, so the top part. So we've got our base, which I'm very happy with, and I've just put the laser on just to see how it's all going to look, but now we need to enclose this, so that's what we're going to be working on today. So quite a lot of pieces and bits here that we need to look at. So there's only one way to get started, and that's to get started, I guess. I'm going to start with the window sections of the enclosure by cutting strips of form ply. We'll then use those strips to form the window for the top and sides. While yes, we could cut a single panel and then cut the window out from that panel, but that would require me to consume a lot more form ply than what is necessary. It's a little more work to do it this way, but is a much more efficient use of the form ply I have, and given the price of this stuff these days, you don't really want to be unnecessarily wasting it. To assemble the window frames, nothing complicated here, we're just going to use pocket screws. When it comes to installing pocket screws, slow and steady wins the race. Go slow to avoid overdriving, and make good use of clamps to ensure your pieces don't move. Okay, so this is another classic example of sort of changing your mind on the fly as you go, and the nature of these kind of projects, that's bound to happen, because obviously as you start to see how it might work or fit, you make some design changes. So the design change I have made is originally this was going to be a window, and this is going to be a window, and then that was going to be the back as per usual, and there'll be a fan that goes there to extract some air. So what I've decided to do, however, is actually just make this a solid panel, and this a solid panel, but this a window and this a window. Originally this was going to be a window, but I really realized that all of the I/O ports for this here, there's a whole bunch of stuff that has to come out, and then would have to go out here somewhere so that they can be connected to miscellaneous parts, and this makes a logical mounting surface. So if there was a window here, I wouldn't really be able to do any of that. I'd have to sort of route it, well, somewhere, I don't know. So I think what I will do is make this sort of a mounting surface where miscellaneous things can be mounted or tied to, or whatever it might be. I don't think having a window here was really going to lose any functionality. I'll still have very big window here, very big window here. There'll be a big window on the top here where it's sort of all of this is going to open and close type things. So yeah, I don't think I'm losing much with that one. So, and it also makes the build a lot easier, because now I can attach these two and I don't have to worry about a window here and all of that kind of stuff. So I think that was a wise decision. So with that design change now made, I'm going to focus on putting the rebate in the window frames that will accept our acrylic windows. This is a simple enough process over on the router table with a rebate bit. For the actual window panels, I'm going to be using 3mm acrylic sheet that I sourced from my local Bunnings. This of course is not rated for lasers and isn't going to remove the necessity of ensuring that I wear appropriate eye protection when cutting. While it would have of course been preferable to use laser approved acrylic, the cost of such a sheet at the same size as this I calculated to be around 10 times more, and given that this acrylic sheet was already very expensive, it simply didn't make sense to do so. After cutting to size and rounding the corners on the disc sander, I glued in the acrylic panels using CA glue. I was skeptical that this was supposed to work, but I have been assured by the internet that it would be fine, and really, when has the internet not been right? While those were drying, I went ahead and cut out the duct port that attaches to the back panel. The adapter I'm using here is a 4-inch port that's left over from a kit that I used when I was setting up my dust collection in the shop. I haven't used any sort of gasket here, it feels like a pretty close fit, but I may come back later with some silicone if this doesn't prove to be enough. The final component to fix to the enclosure is the doors, and I'm going to do that with some piano hinges. There will be 2 hinges required for this design, and the first is on top of the main window, and the second is the smaller front window that hinges upward. Both of the doors are attached to each other in a sort of gull wing door arrangement that should make more sense soon. Piano hinges are notorious for using very tiny and very easy to break screws. If you happen to use these types of hinges on your own enclosure or other project, be sure to make sure you pre-drill and use a screwdriver to install rather than a cordless driver. Alright, so let's give it a little test. So the idea is that the front can hinge so that I can hit the emergency button, or I can see the control panel at the front here. And then the idea will be that this can then hinge when I want to change out wood or put something in there. So that looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. So we can, that's fine, I don't mind it sort of resting there on like that, as long as there's something behind here. I think what I'll do is maybe make a triangle bracket that just sits here, and then literally that will be the up position. Okay. That is pretty cool. With the main enclosure now done, we can add the small necessary touches. The first is an access hole for all the cables needed to run the laser. For this task, I'm installing a desk grommet or desk cable organizer. This is common for desks, but is a perfect solution in this particular circumstance. For the next part, I made some handles, one for the top and one for the front. They are made in the same way that the supports for the fold-out desk were, and in fact use the same template as before. Just some simple brackets with the dowel threaded through and screwed together. To allow air to be drawn into the cabinet, I've cut out a section on the side to allow the mounting of a small vent. A simple Forstner bit to notch out the corners, and then finishing off with a jigsaw. So in terms of enclosure, we're pretty much finished. There's a couple of little final things to do, which is to do some cable management. So once I put the laser back in the enclosure, I'm going to obviously do some cable management, make sure that that's all set, ready to go. But in regards to the enclosure, pretty much finished. So let's do a quick guided tour. So I've put some handles on the doors, so a small handle at the front and a larger handle at the top. There isn't one on this side because I just don't think it's necessary. If I'm opening it, I'm probably going to be opening it from the side, and that's pretty easy to do. So really no necessity to have handles on two sides. And on that side, I've put the bracket that holds the door up anyway. So handle here and a handle here. Of course, we've got the tray, and this obviously folds up and folds away when I don't need it to save a little bit of space. Obviously, when I fold it up, I can put my laptop here and I can route my cables directly into the laser. So pretty convenient, pretty easy to do. So really happy with that feature as well. Of course, we've got our drawers for storing stuff. Haven't worked out what I'm going to need. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff when it comes to lasers. I've put a few things in there already, but there's a whole bunch of accessories and I'm sure other things that I'll put into those drawers very shortly. In terms of the air filtration or air extraction, so we've got, again, our duct here and it's pumped into a fan here. Now, I'm skeptical that this fan is big enough. This is a very tiny fan. Well, it's a 100mm fan, but it's a very small CFM fan. I think it's only about 70 or 80 CFM, so it's not a high performance one. It might be sufficient to get rid of most of the smoke, I think, but I have ordered a much larger fan, one that's 3 or 4 times the capacity. It's also significantly bigger. So it hasn't arrived yet, but I don't think it's going to stop me from at least testing this arrangement. So we'll see how we go. And finally, we can put the laser in its new home. I'm going to reuse the baseboard that I made in the first Delta review video, and I bought a new honeycomb panel that is the proper size of the workable area, as the previous one was slightly undersized. Right, so you join us at a very exciting moment. I am about to do my first test in the new enclosure. So everything is set up, laptop set up, all the cabling, well, it's all connected, but there's no cable management yet. We'll sort that out. I really don't want to do anything permanent just yet until I work out if this fan that I've got is really going to be up for the challenge. So I'm going to start with the basic logo. Not a high power setting, shouldn't create too much smoke, but I just want to see what it is capable of doing. So let's go ahead and see how that goes. Okay, so our first test is just done, and I'm just going to open it up and see what I can smell or experience. So here we go. Well, so far so good. I don't smell anything. I have noticed, however, that we do have some sort of, I guess it's smoke a little bit that's on the perspex. It doesn't look too serious, but I've got a feeling that that might cause a problem in the future. So yeah, I think what we'll do is we'll definitely swap out for the better fan and see how we go.
1 week later.
Right, so here is the old fan, and over here is the new fan. I really should have paid more attention to the specs, dimensions, and sizes, but good lord. And just for fun, let's put these side by side. I think there might be a slight performance differentiation, but hey, let's go ahead and install this and see what happens. So to mount the new fan, it just uses a little bracket. I'll screw it to this and mount it back on here. So with the power of editing, so our fan is now installed. Good Lord, it's a little bit bigger than the last one. Did have to trim this a little bit, but all in all good. It does have a speed control, which is great, and it's not that loud. So if we turn it on, I'll put it on its height setting. That's still pretty quiet actually, but it is pumping out so much more air here. So I think this is a much better solution, but there is only one way to find out if that's true. So test number 2 is now complete. Let's see how we're traveling. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely a massive difference between the two fans. So before, with the old fan, when I opened it, I could still smell a bit of smoke, probably from what was sticking to the perspex here. But there's definitely no smell whatsoever now, and no fumes, and there's nothing on the glass. So before there was a little tiny bit of film on the glass, there's nothing like that now. So the new fan is definitely an upgrade, and I will link you to the one that I bought to use in this in the description below. So that pretty much wraps things up. Hopefully you enjoyed this build, and if you're interested in learning more about the Delta Laser that I use, why not check out my previous videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.